In this video, I'm going to discuss monosaccharides and disaccharides, which are collectively known as simple sugars. Monosaccharides are simple sugars. They're the simplest kind of sugar. The term mono means one, and the term saccharide refers to a structural unit for carbohydrates. Again, I've mentioned this in previous videos. In all carbohydrates, we have one carbon atom for two hydrogen atoms to one oxygen atom. This is sometimes represented as C subscript N, H subscript 2N, and O subscript N. Where N, you could essentially substitute different numbers in for N. Like you could put in the number 6, for example. You'd have 6 carbon, 2 times 6 would be 12, so H12, and then O6. Glucose is a monosaccharide that's found in plants and in the human blood. So in fact, during photosynthesis, one of the first products that's made by plants is glucose. And in humans, glucose is extremely important. It's known as the blood sugar, and it's essentially the sugar your blood carries and brings energy essentially to all the cells in your body. So blood glucose levels are very important, and they have to be maintained within a very narrow range of values for good health. Another sugar that's very important is fructose. Fructose is also a monosaccharide, so it's very simple. And it's also known as a fruit sugar. So after making glucose, plants often convert the glucose to fructose. So you'll find fructose in lots and lots of plants and in fruits. And here we can see two structural diagrams, one for glucose and one for fructose. And if we look at these carefully, and if you actually count the carbon atoms, you'll see that both of these have 6 carbon atoms. And they both have the same overall formula, which is C6H12O6. So again, monosaccharides are simple sugars. Here's another 2 simple sugars that are very important and that we'll talk a lot about in this course. One is ribose. Ribose is a monosaccharide that is found in ribonucleic acid, or RNA. And if we look at it, it has a slightly different formula. It's C5H10 and O5. So it's a 5 carbon sugar. And actually, if you look carefully at the diagram here, and if you count the carbons, you'll see that there are only 5 carbons. Now, another very important sugar is deoxyribose. This is also a monosaccharide. It's one that's found in DNA, which is called deoxyribonucleic acid. So it's named essentially after the sugar. If you look again at this one, it's also a 5 carbon sugar. So it's again C5H10O4. But here's the thing. So normally that should be O5, right? But this is deoxyribose. So it is a sugar, but it's a little bit unusual. It's missing one oxygen. The D is essentially a negation. We've removed one oxygen atom, and that's why it's called deoxyribose. So the name actually makes a lot of sense. Now, as I mentioned in the very beginning of this video, there are also disaccharides. What happens, you get a disaccharide when you link together 2 monosaccharides. So a good example of a disaccharide that you're familiar with is sucrose, which is table sugar. It's a disaccharide, meaning it consists of 2 monosaccharides that are joined together. The prefix di means 2. So sucrose is made up of glucose, which is the sugar that I just talked about. It's found in plants and also in your blood. And you combine that with fructose, which is the fruit sugar, through a dehydration reaction, which we've discussed in previous videos. And then we get sucrose, the disaccharide. I want to talk about another very important disaccharide, which is lactose. It's a disaccharide that's found in milk and in milk products. The prefix lact actually means milk. So people with lactose intolerance have difficulty digesting lactose. And you can see in this figure here, we can see the percent of the adult population with lactose intolerance. So if we look at people early on, everyone has the enzyme, which is lactase, which breaks down lactose. But as we get older, many people in the world lose that enzyme. And it's only in parts of the world where there's a long history of herding sheep, goats, and cows, and getting milk from these animals, do we have people that essentially had a mutation which allowed them to maintain the ability to generate the enzyme lactose? So if you see in Europe, there's quite a low incidence of people with lactose intolerance there. If you look in Africa, there's part of Africa in which there are people that have traditionally herded animals and gotten milk from those animals. And there's some other parts of the world too where there's a very low percentage of lactose intolerance people. And then there are other areas of the world where essentially almost everyone is lactose intolerant. And so again, that has to do with history and history of herding animals and so forth and getting milk from them. Nowadays, it's actually possible for just about anyone to partake in things that have lactose in it. Even if they are lactose intolerant, you can, for example, buy Lactaid, and you can see a picture here that I've taken. This is actually a lactase enzyme that you can take. So basically the idea is you start to eat something that's high in lactose, like ice cream, or you could drink milk, and then you would take the Lactaid at the same time, and you'd have the lactase enzyme, which would break down lactose into its component parts. It's two simpler monosaccharides, which basically everyone can digest without any trouble. The other possibility is if someone is lactose intolerant, they may be able to eat milk products that have been fermented. So yogurt is fermented. There are a number of other, sour cream is fermented. So there are a number of milk products that have been fermented. Hard cheeses are also a good one. So for example, Swiss cheese, cheddar cheese, Parmesan cheese, these hard cheeses have been fermented, and in that process, the lactose is broken down into simpler sugars that pretty much everyone can digest. Okay, so that's it. I've talked about monosaccharides and disaccharides. And in continuing videos, we'll talk a little bit more about carbohydrates. Thanks a lot for watching.